Hello, friends! How are you today? I am back to read from chapters 39, 40, and 41 of Dark World Lightwork, and those chapters are called Church in the Wild, Homesick, and Near Death. And there are actually two passages from Church in the Wild that I have to read. I'm going to read the first one, and then the second one is my favorite story from the whole book, so I have to read that one. So let's get it going because I know that this camera is going to cut off. All right, Church in the Wild. Once we left San Diego, Clementine and I traveled around Southern California for the next 5 months. We went to the beach, 3 lakes, the desert, the forest, the city, and as far up into the mountains as my car could reach. We never stayed in a town for more than a night or so. It was freeing knowing that we were just passing through. One night, we drove for hours. I'd never been so exhausted. I don't remember the town we were in, but I finally pulled to a stop on a dark residential-looking road near some beautiful green trees. I thought that would be better than falling asleep at the wheel. The next morning, we woke up before sunrise as usual. I opened an app to search for hiking trails in the area, only to discover that we were parked in a neighborhood at the base of the Angeles National Forest. I was still exhausted, but we had to move before anyone saw us. The nearest trail was less than a mile away. Whenever I started up a winding road, I was always nervous that the incline would be too much for the car, but we made the climb with ease. I decided not to tempt fate. Once we were in the forest, I turned off at the first picnic area I saw. The air was crisp and fresh compared to the city. There was no one else in the parking lot, but the area was bustling with activity. The sounds of nature were tuned up to the max. Bird calls and the snapping of branches filled the air with harmony, melody, and percussion. The mood was refreshing, and I was grateful for the moment of solitude. It was just after 5 a.m., too early to walk. Clem and I took the opportunity to sleep in just a little. Just after 7 a.m., we were awakened by the sound of a truck pulling into the lot. I sat up quickly. I peered out the window where I saw a young man pulling a backpack out of his trunk. I assumed he'd be on his way, but he took the bag and got back into the front of his car. He appeared to be rearranging his things. I really wanted him to go. I was still so tired, I just wanted a little more time alone. Why couldn't the guy just go on his hike? Why did he have to be making a commotion next to me when I was just trying to rest? I remembered to be grateful for the few hours that we did get and move on. I figured it would be a good time to take Clem on her morning walk to explore the campgrounds. I jumped out of the car and headed over to her side. When the man saw me, he got out of his car and started towards me. I was furious. He'd already interrupted my respite, and now he had the audacity to approach me. I wanted to scream. God does have a sense of humor. The man turned out to be very friendly. He introduced himself and let me know that he too was on a journey of self-discovery in the name of God. I hadn't realized it was such a trend. He handed me a small booklet. It was the tale of his travels up to that point. The man gave me the booklet and told me to check it out when I had a chance. I wished the guy well and felt bad for being so annoyed with him at first. I felt like a good way to make it up to the guy was to read his pamphlet. I sat back in my car to give it a look. It was a testimony. He'd been traveling for over 2 years, preaching the gospel and sharing God's grace with others. He reminded me of myself in many ways. The only difference was he seemed prepared, content, and at least somewhat in control of his situation. I wondered what my memoirs would look like when it came time for me to recount my story. Would I be honest about the number of times I was irritated by someone's presence, only to meet them and be pleasantly surprised by a kind-hearted individual worthy of love and respect? What would I have to say about life? What would I have to say about God? All right, and then the next passage is just a little bit later in the chapter. Here we go. Once we left check-in, I found some sort of ballroom for us to hide in while we waited for the buffet to open for the day. I almost fell asleep sitting on a bar stool. It was dreadfully hot in the desert, and I just wanted to shower and rest. When the buffet finally opened, I got in line, paid, and sat down, all with Clem strapped to my back. No one noticed her the entire time. I set her up against a wall in the booth while I went to get my first plate. I hit the salad station where I made a presentation of greens and vegetables. I put some grilled chicken to the side for Clem. When I got back to the table, she tried to poke her little nose through the mesh to sniff around. Clem knows the smell of chicken. It's her favorite. I unzipped the bag and grabbed a small piece for her. I proceeded to feed her little bites in between my forkfuls of salad. We were playing kissy face when a waitress came up to the table with a horrified look on her face. "Miss, you can't have a dog at the buffet, and you certainly can't feed it at the table." Of course I can't have a dog at the buffet and feed it at the table. I knew this. However, on this day, the thought had not crossed my mind. I was mortified. I apologized profusely and promised to zip Clem up. The woman wanted us to leave, but I explained that we were waiting to check in and had nowhere else to go. She was completely annoyed, but agreed to let us stay if I kept Clementine zipped up and on the floor the entire time. I must have looked insane to the lady. I behaved like I had zero self-awareness, which at the time I did not. The next day, I went back to the buffet alone. I left Clementine in the room and prayed that the hostess had gone on vacation for the next week. Of course, she was on the clock. She came right over to my table as soon as she saw me. "Where's the dog?" she asked, looking around for Clem. "She's not with me today," I laughed. The way she was nosing around under the table tickled me for some reason. "Mm-hmm," she grunted. Then she walked over to whisper something to the hostess, who shot daggers in my direction shortly after. I couldn't help but laugh. Okay, now I'm going to read from Near Death. The weather was tolerable, but July was sweltering energetically. With each day that passed, my mood became more and more ominous. I attributed the depression to the change in weather. I also thought it could be the change in lifestyle. We'd gone from hiking all day to sitting in a parking lot under an awning. The constant movement was actually giving me life. Now that we were sedentary, I felt drained. Whatever the cause, I was miserable and felt like death. I felt like the flesh was melting off my bones, as if the life was being drained from my body. I prayed for relief, but the agony only grew stronger. I wanted to get out of town, or better yet, off the planet. I couldn't rest. I felt unusually drained. I was in agony. I wondered if the trauma from the recent past was finally catching up to me. I felt like I handled the devastation well. Maybe I was experiencing a delayed reaction. August was even more dire. I could not wake up each morning. I could barely open my eyes. I couldn't catch my breath. I had to force myself to wash up and walk Clementine. I came alive to get around the park. Then it was back to the car to suffer. I felt loss, grief, and sorrow. It was so draining that I felt the resonance on a spiritual level. My soul ached and I longed for peace. On August 24th, I was walking Clem in the park. On our way back to the car, I looked down and spotted some leaves scattered on the ground in the shape of a number 4. I snapped a picture of it and wondered what the message could mean. 4 days, I thought to myself. I hoped that it was something good. Blind optimism has plagued me my entire life. All right, so the next chapter is called Home's Sick. Okay. The seasons were changing and I was itching to go back to Vegas. Living as a nomad was tiring, and on top of that, I was also a refugee in a foreign land. Luckily for me, the land was Southern California, a beautiful and welcoming place that I was familiar with. However, I was homesick and I couldn't shake the feeling that things were not well somewhere. I decided to go back. I felt like I needed to get there before my grandmother's birthday in October. I tried everything else. We traveled all over California. Maybe the answers I sought were back at home. Was it even my home anymore? I had to at least attempt to calm my restless spirits once more. I couldn't think of a better way to pass the time given the circumstances. The weather in Vegas was cooler, but the energy was much different from the beach vibes I'd been in sync with. The Las Vegas Valley is not the type of place that is conducive to car dwelling for many reasons, the climate being the most predominant. The weather makes it nearly impossible. This proved to be the case for me, but I know that there are tougher people than myself on this planet. I'd been back in town for less than 3 weeks. Being homeless in a place where I was no more than 30 minutes from at least 6 family members was pathetic to me. I wanted to go back to California where things made more sense. When I was in California, I wanted to be in Las Vegas. I felt like I no longer had a home. I love the earth, but the whole experience might not be for me. The land, the sea, the animals, and even the insects were all inspiring. However, the layering of this human experience on top of all of that abundance has turned everything into an exhausting, dirty mess. If anything, I wanted to play Eden, not Fall of Man. The whole charade is beneath me, and I was over it. Over it. All right, that is it. Those were chapters 40, 41, and 42 of Dark World Light Work. And next we will be on to 43, 44, and 45. And those chapters are called Postmortem, Post Vitam, and The Great Reset. I'll see you next time.